All right, we'll move on to the fund balance for overspending in the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, second, and discussion. I'm going to invite CFO Kutska. I was distracted. Alex, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. So this action is a technical action. In order to close the books, like our accounting books for the year for Ramsey County, we do not have enough appropriations in order to close our books with this deficit. So we are asking for up to $2.8 million in ability to close the year end. We will not use any funds that are not needed as we finalize this. But basically how it works, so you kind of understand, is right now we're sitting with negative expenditures on our books. We can't finish a year like that, so we have to ask you all for the money on the expenditure side to be able to do that. To your question earlier, Commissioner McGuire, where this money comes from, we are asking for the use of fund balance. Currently, at the close of 2021, we had $169 million in our unrestricted fund balance. This is a significant amount of money. I don't want to downplay that, but we do have enough in our savings account to pay for this without an impact on a one-time basis to the taxpayers of Ramsey County. So how this will work is if we get a yes vote today, my staff will work to close out the books of the Sheriff's Office, and we will be able to close the year and report back to you on our overall, how we finish the year within the next, I don't want to put too much pressure on my staff, but 4 to 6 weeks. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Commissioner Ortega and then Commissioner McGuire.
Well, my question is, I am going to vote in the affirmative, given the prior resolutions we passed in terms of the controls. But let me ask you this. What if we're at this time next year and we have $1 million deficit, whatever it is? I guess my question is, or better yet, let me change the question. What if we weren't to pay the $2.5 million? What's the next process?
Thank you,
Or the $3 million?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner Ortega. Thank you for the question. It's a really good question, and I've contemplated with my staff what would happen if the board did not allow this fund. We would delay and come back and ask you again. I don't have a good path forward on the expenditure side to be able to pay these. These funds have been spent. We have obligated, the Sheriff's Office has spent over $2.7 million above what they were appropriated to spend. And in order to pay those bills, I need your authority to be able to do that. It can be delayed, but I have not found another path forward that would allow me to do that. I'm happy to consult with our county attorney's office on that. To your other question, if I may, Madam Chair, I think it's a really good point to think about where we are in the year. Knowing about the $2.7 million after the year has closed makes it very difficult for me to come forward with any ideas or tools of how we can manage that. Knowing sooner in the year and understanding where we are in May, June, July, then you come forward with lots of tools and ability to say, okay, here are the options on the table. Either we can control some of that spending, we can look for other revenue, or we can ask you all in partnership with the Sheriff's Office for these are places they are experiencing stresses. Do you as a board want to increase their appropriations mid-year due to that, or do we want to take other actions to control it? When you don't know until the year has shut, I don't have those tools to come forward, and you don't have the options that you should have to address that.
Well, Madam Chair, my point is, I guess I'm not being very optimistic, and I usually am, but I'm assuming we might be in the same spot next year.
Right.
And then I'm saying any other organization, there are measures you could take. In essence, you got to pay back. You might extend it over 3 or 4 years, but you got to take appropriate measures to reduce your expenses to manage within that new budget. I guess we need to explore with those possibilities, because we can make all the pretty speeches in the world. The reality is that we need to change the behavior and how we're doing business. Yeah. And that we should start thinking about that now. Yeah. And where do we draw the line and deal with it? I mean, it'll be creating a crisis, but sometimes that's what you got to do.
Thank you, Commissioner Ortega. Point well made. County Manager O'Connor.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Ortega, thank you for those comments. And I want to add one piece to what the CFO said, and I want to finish on where you just went. The question around what are the options left is actually one of the most important that was communicated a few weeks ago when we started this conversation, which is it both feels and is accurate at this point to acknowledge that the entity that is here to set the budget for this public organization, the county board, had that authority removed from them in this particular instance, and now is being forced to fund an obligation that they never prioritized through their thoughtful budget process through the year. And that's a hard reality to where we currently sit, and one that we need to acknowledge, and then say, so to your point, when you talk about next year, it is my responsibility in working with all of you and with working with Alex and this entire organization to not come back in this spot again, ever. It's not okay. It's not a spot that anyone here feels good about where we now sit today, because the board never authorized the money before it got spent. And that is problematic from my seat and yours and the broader public, as mentioned. In terms of what that means for controls, the tools in front of us here, I believe, will enforce discipline to the budget as passed, in the same way that we enforce discipline with every other place in the organization. We do not allow obligations to happen ahead of time. And so to that end, we will, if need be, come in aggressively next year. I will come back to you aggressively as the year is going on to have these conversations, because I do not want to make this ask on behalf of the organization again. I feel that we have to do better to prevent it from ever happening, and it does rely upon trust from all parties. And that is a part of this that comes with it, is the sheriff needs to commit alongside us to doing better. We will use every tool we have to help ensure that occurs. But government is based on the idea that those we elect and appoint do good work on behalf of the public. And there's a serious and sound responsibility with that, and we will hold him to that, and I ask that you hold us to that as well.
Thank you, County Manager O'Connor. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you, CFO Kutza. So you mentioned the fund balance, which we're going to, this will be allocated out of that. What else, what do we do with the fund balance? I mean, it's usually there because of emergencies and things that we may need, and we've seen where we've had to use it in the past. And so it's not good to be budgeting out of a fund balance. I mean, could you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure, happy to. Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner McGuire. So fund balance is, as you think about it, your savings account. I've come before you plenty of times in my tenure here about the rainy day and with COVID and different situations. We've basically been in that situation since I got here. So you use it for those things, right? You have it. If you remember back in August, we do a presentation about the overall status of the budget, and we talked about the rule for the county, or your recommendation, your ordinance is we have to have 2 months of operating expenditures. We are closer to 4 than 2, so we definitely, which helps us get higher ratings. It helps us get lower interest rates that we just got on the bonds that we sold. It helps us be a AAA rated county, and so we do have significant reserves. But they're used for plenty of things. We've come forward, we've budgeted them for one-time items in the budget. We use them in situations such as this, maybe coming forward. Previously, we've come forward for the sheriff, actually, for contingency funding, which ultimately would go back to the fund balance if not used, for civil unrest and costs that are really unanticipated and one-time in nature. So that's generally how we use fund balance. I can give you more examples if you need them.
No, I appreciate that. I think it's just, as we've all been saying, we have a budgeting process that we have. It's a very thoughtful process. We bring all of our departments in. We talk about all of our priorities, and then we give a budget, which we did with the sheriff's office. He, as we've all been saying, overspent that by almost $3 million. And then it requires that we take it out of a fund balance that is there as a savings, as a rainy day fund, and has not been part of the budgeting process that we all spend a lot of time on. And so I'm just going to reiterate, I'm grateful to the county for putting in the measures that we did in the previous motion to hopefully make this something that we don't have to see again. And none of us want to do this because we don't think this is a proper way to be budgeting. But as you said, you're going to come back to us. You're going to keep coming back to us until we do it, it feels like. So feels like
I agree with you. I wish I didn't have to do that either, Commissioner McGuire.
So we have a snowmageddon about to hit. It could potentially be an unforeseen emergency. If we drain this fund balance, how do we respond given it's this year? What's the plans in place for that?
So, Madam Chair, the fund balance goes across years, right? So as we close the books, you would either see a contribution to fund balance or use of fund balance at the end of the year. We're coming forward now because we need fund balance to actually close our books. We will then figure out when everything closes where we end the year. So with snowmageddon coming, and that if there was a need, so it's early in 2023. I would never anticipate, as your Chief Financial Officer, it would be very rare for me to come early in a year, because what I would say to any department, including the sheriff or public works or any department, please try and manage this within your budget. In any given budget, our priorities and the work that we do shifts and changes, right? So early in a calendar year, early in a budget year, you have appropriations and you have money. So let's think about how we use that going into the rest of the year and plan. So for example, my staff is going to be spending a lot of time on the sheriff's office. I have to look at the priorities of how I do that, shift around my priorities, and make sure that I have the staff and the funding to be able to do that without coming here and asking you for additional funds. So we will do that. And let's say we get 4 more snowmageddons this year, and they just can't, I know, I'm sorry, they can't manage it. Then we would come forward. I would work with the deputy county manager, I would work with the directors, we would put together a proposal, and we would say this was very unforeseen and historically different, just like we did with civil unrest. And we would come forward and we would explain, likely sometime in the fall, that is when, as your advisor, that is when we would know, I don't think they're going to make it through the year. Let's come proactively, explain to you what has happened. And then you can think about if that's a good use of funds or not. And you still have a quarter left of the year. If you say, nope, that's not where we want to go, then we have to manage really well that last quarter of the year.
Got it. Thank you. Commissioner Moran, did you have a question?